Welcome to another episode of the Three Guys Analyze podcast. This is our second week in a row. Shocking we've all made it here again this weekend. I am obviously your host, Matt. Over in the west part of the state, we have Tony Crier calling in. And then in the northern part of the state, we have Rick Martin calling in. How are you doing?
Hey.
Tony?
What's going on?
Ricky, how are you doing up there?
Doing well. Hey, I need to say a quick apology to the sponsors. Short Clips Lawn Care. Didn't mean the comment I said last week with the laundering. That was sorry. Shortcuts. Sorry for that as well. Shortcuts Lawn Care.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm doing well. Hopefully we can find some new sponsors for next week's podcast.
Well, I've put the feelers out there. We've disgraced our previous sponsors. We're destitute. This program takes a lot of money to produce. You can tell that, and we're looking for all we can get. All right, let's get into conversations. So last week, we kind of talked about games of the past weekend, so let's reflect back on that. So we're going to look on 3 games today. We're going to talk about Notre Dame, Michigan, Oklahoma, Kansas State, and Ohio State versus Wisconsin. So let's go ahead and start with that Notre Dame Michigan game. Ricky, you had already put Michigan in the coffin, buried them, driven the nails.
3 touchdowns.
So Rick, what do you got to say about the rise from the grave by the Michigan Wolverines?
Tell you what, it was an impressive win. I'll give them that. I think being at home, the conditions helped. Brian Kelly just, was turning 50 shades of red during the game, as he likes to do when his team just can't, get out of their own way. Typical Notre Dame game. Every time I think that they're going to go through and pull something out, they fold like a chair and go home. So, I was wrong. Michigan was a good showing. I'm actually kind of excited for the Ohio State-Michigan game now. Maybe it'll be a little bit better than people thought a couple weeks ago.
Tony, what about you?
You definitely saw Notre Dame implode majorly. I think the biggest thing was Brian Kelly's play calling. In those conditions, he threw the ball 31 times. It amazes me in that slog. 31 times throwing period is just ridiculous in that conditions. And they weren't even really good passes. And the whole offense just seemed to just implode. They couldn't get anything going. But credit Michigan's defense for sure. They definitely showed up to play. But I think the biggest take you can take from the game is that it shows Notre Dame, number one, is overrated, as in most years. But then I believe it shows that Georgia is just as overrated as Notre Dame. And I don't think that they're going to finish strong here down the stretch.
Yeah, that's a take I've heard this past week is what does it really say about Georgia? That Notre Dame was within 7 in that game, and they get demolished by a Michigan team that I had thought, kind of went back 400 years in offense, right? They were just learning how to throw the ball, it looked like. So I haven't been real high on the Georgia team all year, and obviously none of us have been that high on Michigan. And look, Notre Dame has been relevant since Manti Te'o had a fake girlfriend. So I always look down on them. They have a quarterback.
Hey,
his last name is Book.
They made the playoffs last year.
Oh, do they? I can never remember because they get slaughtered every year they're in it. So it's really – are they really in the playoffs? They're just taking up a spot, I guess. But so I think that was a really interesting outcome. And like Ricky said, maybe that – it's got to be good for the Big Ten, Michigan winning that game, and they'll give Ohio State a tougher strength of schedule going into the playoff, I guess. All right, so our next game we're going to talk about is the Oklahoma-Kansas State game, which was a real barn burner. Kansas State nearly throwing that game up on themselves, trying to claim defeat from the jaws of victory. Tony, what do you think about Oklahoma's loss in that game?
To be honest, not surprising. Granted, Alex Grinch's defense has played spectacular through 7 games, but this Kansas State team, they're 5-2, and they're not a bad team. Trust me, the work that their coach has done, Chris Kleiman, is incredible. And, you know, they played a tough game similar to what Bill Snyder would have done. But it also shows, you know, Oklahoma's defense gave up 48 points to that. And, you know, it's not like Kansas State is, you know, a juggernaut like Alabama or Ohio State. So what would happen then if Oklahoma makes the top four? I think this was definitely a good wake-up call, not only for Oklahoma, but I think for the Big 12 in general now, because now they're resting their playoff hopes on a shockingly undefeated Baylor team.
Yeah, you know, you thought Oklahoma had shored up that defense, and they're playing a little better, and just lay an egg to Kansas State. Now, they might be an okay team, but that league is so top heavy. I think definitely there's no way they make the playoff now. I don't think they're getting beat by Kansas State, and they were beat by 21 at one point in that game. And they, through flukes and miracles, they came back at it, and that was staggering to see. But Ricky, what do you think about that? What does it say more about this?
So you think the Big 12 is out of the playoff running now?
I wouldn't say out.
I mean, well, if it's not Oklahoma, it's not going to be anyone else.
I think the Pac-12. I think they just jumped up a lot because of that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I watched the fourth quarter of this game, so I missed all the 17-0 run that Kansas State went on there. Actually, I even jumped into it later than that. I guess it was 24-0 run to start the second half. The thing I don't really understand is watching Oklahoma's offense move the ball pretty effortlessly in the last 10 minutes of this game. And I don't really get how they went, you know, basically the entire second and third quarters without scoring a touchdown against this Kansas State defense. I mean, let's be honest, even if you want to call them a stingy defense, they're still a Big 12 defense that's going to allow, you know, 500 plus yards a game, especially to an offense as good as Oklahoma. So I didn't watch enough. I don't know if there's a lot of turnover, a lot of weird plays that went against them, penalties, what it might be. But it's just interesting to me in some of these games when a juggernaut like Oklahoma gets down by 10, 17, 24 points, and then they just effortlessly come back and win. And if the game was going to have another quarter in it, they would have won by double digits. So I don't know. I think it ends the Big 12's playoff hopes. I'm kind of with Matt on that one. I don't see Oklahoma getting in over a one-loss SEC school or even maybe the one-loss Pac-12 champion.
Ricky, how'd you feel about that onside kick?
It was a blown call. It hit the Kansas State player's knee behind the Oklahoma player. I'm telling you, if you put the three angles together, you can see it.
You know,
I'm telling you.
They reviewed that for over 5 minutes. There was indisputable video evidence because of that shows it clearly hits the Oklahoma player and then hits the Kansas State player. So by definition, it's illegal touching. Now, granted,
it was indisputable.
It was close to 10 yards, but not close enough. I guess I wasn't seeing the same replays you were seeing then, evidently.
So this is my thing, though. Like, in tennis, you can pinpoint a ball was a millimeter on the line or not on the line to call it in or out. I don't understand why it's still, like, looking to see which player the ball contacted first. Don't we have enough technology, enough camera angles on a nationally broadcast game that they can figure out exactly who it touched and at what point? I still don't get how we need to piece together and splice together 3 separate video feeds and take 10 minutes to figure out where the ball landed. It's like other sports do this much, much better.
Well, I mean, tennis does have the 2 people playing and not the 22 people on the field at the same time. But
just saying, it's almost 2020.
They only have the camera angles that they're working with the broadcast. So whatever the broadcast has is the replays they basically
They had 3 camera angles on that. I watched all 3 of them.
And all 3 showed the Oklahoma player hitting the ball.
Hey, just saying. Look at the tape.
Tape. There it is. All right.
Wow.
So on to the last one here, and I'll start this with the Ohio State conversation is, Wisconsin lost in the look-ahead game. Not shocking. Ohio State got pummeled by Purdue last year. It happens. And, that Taylor guy, he's a pretty good running back, and we all thought maybe they might do something in Ohio State, and even in that down par, you think it played to Wisconsin's strengths, and they just got rocked by Ohio State. It wasn't even a contest. Ohio State dominated both lines of scrimmage, which offensively speaking, I didn't think they were going to be able to do, but they made Wisconsin look like Rutgers for all intents and purposes. They looked real bad. Tony, what does this say more about, Ohio State or Wisconsin?
I think on two fronts, I think it shows how strong Ohio State is on both sides of the ball, because going into it, they said that Wisconsin had the best offensive line in football. They had the best running back in football, and they were going to smash it down Ohio State's throat. And they came in, and they were running the same plays that they've had all year and having great success. And they just looked like they were not ready for this game. Maybe the cold was, too much for them, because it was a cold, rainy day in Columbus. But it also it talks about how strong Ohio State is this year. You can't really pinpoint like a true weakness on this team. I think this is like one of the most complete teams that we've had in Columbus for a couple years. I would say probably 2015, where we the year after we won the national title game, even though we didn't win the national title that year. I think this team will definitely at least make the playoff, if not win the whole thing.
A good effort by Ohio State. Shows that they can play multiple styles. That was a game, if you had to walk in there and say the weather conditions at kickoff, who's it going to favor? Definitely be Wisconsin with their kind of just grinded out, pounded out style of football. I honestly don't think Wisconsin's very good. I don't think the Big Ten in general is that good. And I think even you want to say that Michigan might be back with their win against Notre Dame, but I really do think that speaks more to just the lack of parity that's in college football between the teams at the top and the teams that are on that second tier, where I really think anyone can beat anyone on a given weekend. You can excuse Wisconsin's loss to Illinois if you want to as a look-ahead trap game, but at the end of the day, they only beat Northwestern by 9, and they haven't really played anyone that difficult in their schedule, and they very well could lose 3 straight with their game against Iowa next week. So I think it was a good win by Ohio State. I agree with Tony. This is probably the most complete team since that 2015 Ohio State team, which I think is the best Ohio State team, at least in recent history. They sent 10, 11 players in the first 2 rounds of the draft from that team. So I think this team's got a real shot to win the national title. I want to get your guys' thoughts on this. I saw Paul Feinbaum said he thinks Chase Young could win the Heisman this year. You guys think that's a possibility if he keeps having games like he did Saturday?
I'll go first on it. I definitely think so. When Ndamukong Suh had his really good senior year, I thought he should have won it that year. Like, he dominated when he played for Nebraska. And Chase Young, he
probably would have won it had he not gotten beat by Colt McCoy in that Texas game.
You're right.
Or the Texas-Nebraska game.
Chase Young dominates. Like, he gets sacks through double teams. Like, he got 2 sacks against a double team against Wisconsin. And they have huge offensive linemen and huge tight ends. Like, he gets off the ball so fast. He cannot be stopped. He has 13 and a half sacks. Like, he barely plays in the fourth quarter. He still leads the NCAA in sacks, like pressures, tackles for loss. Like, the guy is a monster. Like,
I think so. The case for him is Joe Burrow's got to get injured and/or LSU's just got to lose, right?
I don't think so. I think Chase Young is a finalist. I think he gets a go to New York, but no chance. There's been, what? How many would you say? 80 or so Heisman trophies given out. And of those, they're all, there was one player that was primarily a defensive player, and it was a punt returner / sometimes wide receiver / corner. I don't see it. I don't see it. It's an offensive award, and it's going to stay an offensive award. Honestly, I don't know how a defensive player can win it in this day and age, especially with how great the quarterbacks are playing, unless the voters just see that all the quarterbacks are just putting up so many good stats that you just can't choose, and you end up choosing a defensive player. But I think that's the only way the mindset gets changed. And I think it's Joe Burrow's to lose at this point. I mean, I strongly agree he's going to have one hell of a game next week against Alabama, like Johnny Manziel-like game. And honestly, I think he's going to solidify his candidacy then.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I agree with it being an offensive award. I mean, typically offensive players win it, obviously, but we've seen years like when Matt brought up in the Ndamukong Suh that it's possible to have a defensive player.
Yeah, but more often than not, they're just a finalist, and that's it.
Well, but my thing is, usually we have more breakout stars and front runners by week 10 than we do this year. I mean, really, outside of Joe Burrow, I mean, Jalen Hurts is out of the race after that loss. Tua is probably out after.
Still played well in that game.
He may have played well, but they're not going to give it to a third straight Oklahoma quarterback to a team that doesn't make the playoff. The Heisman Trophy winner will be from a team that makes the playoffs, is my prediction. So if I think that Alabama doesn't have anyone, I think Joe Burrow is the definite obvious front runner right now if they continue to win and play well. And Clemson, I don't think Clemson has anyone that is maybe ETN, but I mean, other than that, I don't think they really have anyone that would.
But do we forget about Ohio State's two offensive players in J.K. Dobbins and Justin Fields?
I mean, they've been pretty good.
I mean, I would say those two have a better chance of winning the Heisman than what Chase Young does, for sure.
I don't know. That Wisconsin game, everyone watched that. Like, I was on Twitter, and all they were talking about is how good Chase Young is. Now, that's all
I've heard all week is about how great Chase – but history's not on the side. History is not on the side of the defensive player.
If they go undefeated and run the table and Chase Young gets 18 sacks, 20 sacks, I mean, he's at 13.5 now where they have 5 games left.
He's going to have to break He's going to have to break the NCAA record.
It's interesting. Bruce Feldman had an article on The Athletic, it was called The Case for Chase, because of how different, I guess, he has been. If you subscribe to The Athletic, it's a definite must read, because it talks about an entire case on why he should be. And there were some great points, don't get me wrong, because, the Heisman Trophy is supposed to go to the most outstanding player in college football. But lately it's just been the best running back from Alabama or quarterback award. And so right now, you look at Joe Burrow, he's obviously number one. Then I would say you could put, any form of Chase Young, Tua Tagovailoa, and J.K. Dobbins.
Tony, do you want to hear the odds right now?
I'm go for it.
Joe Burrow's even. Okay, that sounds like a terrible bet, right? Jalen Hurts is 7-4, so a little worse than 2-1 odds. Tua is 4-1. Justin Fields is the first Ohio State player at 10-1. So maybe there's something you're saying about these offensive players here, Tony. Chase Young, a 20-1 value pick. That's worth throwing $50 down on, right?
That's easy money.
J.K. Dobbins, 40-1. Wow. And guess who's sitting here last? Jonathan Taylor, 100-1.
Yeah.
He definitely took a big fall with that loss. I mean, he only had 52 yards rushing.
Yeah, that's bad.
On 20 carries.
All right. Let me just read you these stats on Chase Young from this 538 article. So among Power 5 defenders, he leads the nation in tackles for loss with 15.5. Second in disrupted dropbacks at 14.5, and is tied for third in defensive pressures. Now, this is the best stat. So he's tied for 290th of all defensive players in defensive snaps, only playing 261. And only 17 of those snaps have come in the fourth quarter. So, and he leads the nation in sacks. So, that's the sort of disruption Chase Young is getting. That's hard to argue with, but I know it's an offensive award. It's like the MVP in baseball. Whoever puts up the best stats wins it. So, I guess we can render this discussion in a couple weeks, and maybe the odds change, and maybe things go on from there. So, moving on here, let's talk about some of the games this week. So we've picked out 3 this week. We're going to first go over Oregon versus USC. Oregon comes into this game as a 4-point favorite. Tony, what do you like about Oregon versus USC?
I definitely like Oregon at +4. The biggest thing, Oregon's has been playing good defense. I know they played not so good the past 2 weeks against a very good Washington team and, gonna put up points Washington State team. But I think the best thing is Oregon's running back, C.J. Verdell. I mean, he is an absolute monster. And USC right now, they are going through injury after injury after injury. And, at some point you got to start seeing the cracks in the Clay Helton foundation because of just the constant outside noise of when's it coming? When's he going to get fired? And, granted, I do like Keaton Slavis and Graham Harrell's offense at USC, and he's got some great wide receivers around him. Maybe even after Alabama's maybe the best wide receiver core in college football. But I think USC is going to give them a run, but Oregon is just going to end up running the table. I think this is just another step towards Oregon winning the Pac-12 at 12-1.
Ricky, what do you think about? Do you like Oregon in this one?
No, I would take USC. I think Oregon's recent game trend, they had a close game at Washington. I'm not sure we apparently just want to gloss over their last minute field goal they needed to beat a Washington State team that is currently 4-4.
We're glossing over USC's previous week where they had to come back from 14 behind against a not so good Colorado team.
But see, my point is neither of these teams are that good. And this goes back again to the drop-off between the Tier 1 and Tier 2. I have no idea. I mean, USC could beat them by 14, and I wouldn't be necessarily surprised. It's a road game for Oregon. They haven't performed particularly well on the road to this point in the season. I think there's a lot more pressure on them now after the Oklahoma loss because their path to get back into the playoffs is real and tangible, which is something they didn't have a week or even 2 weeks ago. So I think this is just a spot where they'll falter. I mean, I haven't been that impressed with their offense like I thought I would this year. I think
Justin Herbert, he's only thrown for over 2,100 yards, 21 touchdowns, and has only thrown 1 pick all season.
I mean, that's fine. The Pac-12 is not really known for their great defense. And let's see here. They're scored 17 points against Cal. They scored 21 points against Stanford, 35 even at Washington. 37 at Washington State. It's football in 2019. This isn't, 1999. Teams that are playing these defenses with a quarterback that was supposedly a top 5, top 10 draft pick should be putting up more than 21 and 17 points against Stanford and Cal. So you can rattle off all the stats you want. I don't think that they're that good. And the Auburn loss is looking less and less impressive as the weeks go on. Auburn could be a 4-loss team by the end of the year. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think Oregon is one of those mystery teams just because, like Tony said, you never know what's going to happen in the Pac-12. All the teams could go 5-5 the entire season. That's how it is. One team beats another one, and they all beat each other.
Because the Pac-12 is a good conference, top to bottom. They are one of the deepest conferences in football, behind the Big Ten.
How can you say that? Let me rattle off some records here from the Pac-12. You've got Oregon at 7-1 and Utah at 7-1. The next best school is USC at 5-3. Then you've got a 5-3 Arizona State school, a 4-4 Stanford school, a 3-4 Oregon State school, a 3-5 UCLA school, a 3-5 Colorado school. I mean, which one of these teams? Why is this such a deep conference? I don't understand that argument.
Because at any given week, you're not playing a slouch.
But does that mean that they're good?
5 teams that have 500 records or below.
Yeah, because they have to. Well, number one, they have to play each other, and number two, I mean, at this point in the season, I mean, you see a couple bad teams, but you look at how they've lost, and I mean, they're losing close, tough, hard-played games.
Yeah, that screams mediocrity to me. Okay, but I mean, you want to compare them against the Big Ten's best schools? That's fine. We can do that.
You're the one who's saying the Big Ten's. I think Big Ten's the best conference in football. I think the Big Ten East is the best division in football.
Look, I think we could talk about the legitimacy of the Pac-12. There are 12 teams in it now, right? Yeah. So I think we could talk about the legitimacy of the Pac-12, but until one of those teams proves it on a national stage, I mean, when was the last time a Pac-12 team had a big win? Tony, do you know when that was?
I mean, you're not. I mean, I guess you're not wrong.
It's the same reason people put the hurt on Ohio State all those years. They couldn't beat a big team when it counted. I mean, when's the last time Oregon's won a big game? When's the last time USC's won a big game? I mean, it was when Utah, when they had Alex Smith, won a bowl game. Like, when was it? All right, so let's go ahead and move on here to our next game. Let's look at Florida versus Georgia. Georgia comes in as the home favorite in this one at -6.5. Ricky, what do you feel about this one?
I think that line's probably right. I mean, I think this is a touchdown or less game between two good teams. I think Florida is a little probably undervalued here. I actually like Florida to cover. I think Georgia is probably going to win, but I think if 6.5 is too high, in my opinion, this feels more like just a slugfest, rock fight, whatever analogy you want to use, and like a 17-16, 17-14 type game, especially if I don't know what the forecast is down there, but if there's any sort of inclement weather, watch out, because this is going to be a typical SEC defensive battle.
Tony, who do you got, the Gators or the Bulldogs?
I'm taking Florida on the money line. Florida straight up. I see this being Florida is by my opinion the better team. You look at their losses. Georgia lost to a 3-5 South Carolina school, whereas Florida lost a tough game to LSU, and they had their opportunities to win that game. I think Florida's the better team. I think Florida's better on offense, and I think Florida has the better defense. I think Jake Fromm, he definitely is showing his way too much inconsistency in the passing game, especially throwing the deep ball. I think that they definitely not picking Justin Fields over Jake Fromm is really biting them. I think. I mean, they'll disagree, but I firmly believe that. And like I said, I think that Florida defense is going to give Georgia's offense fits because of how I honestly would compare Georgia to Wisconsin.
All right. Yeah, I'm not entirely sold on Georgia. I don't know what – I'm not sold on Jake Fromm. I mean, they beat Oregon. I guess that's cool. I mean, however you feel about that. but I mean they beat Kentucky by 21. Cool, you beat Tennessee. You beat Notre Dame, who just got walloped by Michigan. I mean, so what
Overrated.
really have they proved? I mean, Florida's gonna be their first competitive game they'll play. Florida's beaten some okay teams, so yeah, I don't know, but I'm just not
that's a
sold on
good point. That like, why is the line 6.5? I don't understand what they've seen from either of these two teams that would think that Georgia's almost a touchdown favorite against Florida.
Well, according to the Pick Center on ESPN, most of the bets are coming in on Florida to cover the spread. So, I think 6.5 is really high. But
without
Well, yeah,
doubt.
Florida's loss all year has been at LSU, which is not a bad loss. I mean, it's not anything compared to Georgia's loss against South Carolina. And Georgia's best win is looking worse and worse by the week, as we discussed earlier with that Notre Dame win. So, I mean, is it just pedigree from last year that Georgia carry over? I don't know. I guess I'm confused as to, maybe I should put some money down on Florida.
I guess, and I
I
think
don't know if I go as far as Tony money line, but
I said incorrectly earlier too. It's at the Swamp too, so they're giving 6.5.
No, it's in Jacksonville.
Oh, is it? Okay, it is in
Yeah.
Jacksonville.
this is the largest outdoor cocktail party, isn't it?
That's right.
Yeah.
All right, that's so our last game here we're going to talk about is the great undefeated SMU Ponies, Mustangs, and they're at the Memphis Tigers. And Memphis is a 5.5-point favorite. Tony, now I know you're a huge Sonny Dykes fan, big air raid guy. You think SMU should be favored in this one?
Honestly, I think Memphis being favored by 5.5 is too much, but I think Memphis should be favored. They are the home team in this matchup, and I think that these are two pretty even teams for the most part. I think this is going to be just one of those underrated gems that I'm glad game day's there, and I'm glad it's getting primetime treatment for sure, because these are two great teams. I'm telling you, I think honestly either of these two teams right now could win the ACC Coastal. I mean, just because of how well they play. Shane Buechele is no slouch SMU, and neither is Brady White for Memphis. Memphis also, they have that good wide receiver. No, he's a running back, Kenneth Gainwell, and I think honestly he's going to be the difference maker for Memphis in this ball game.
Ricky, what do you got? You got any hot takes on this one?
No, I could care less about this game, but sure, we'll say Memphis is going to win. I haven't been that impressed with what I've seen from LSU or SMU. Sorry,
that's really all.
That's how little I paid attention to this game.
Let's just say that this is a very weak slate of games this week. Because you can look at this week, but then when you look at next week's slate, not only do you have that LSU Alabama game, but you have what should be the biggest game of the day, that Penn State Minnesota game, and then you have Iowa Wisconsin. That should be a great game. I think that this week's just kind of just a small appetizer for what's coming.
All right. So we've talked about 3 games from last week, 3 games from this week. Let's go ahead and talk about and maybe bring back up our playoff 4 predictor for the end of the year. Tony, so right now, tell us who do you think is going to be in the playoff by the time the end of the year rolls around?
When the playoff committee meets in December, their 4 teams are going to be Ohio State at 1, LSU 2, Clemson 3, and I got Oregon at 4.
All right, Ricky, how about you?
Okay, so I'm gonna think about this for a second. So I agree, Ohio State's gonna be 1 just because I think they have the easiest path to go undefeated. I think I'll go with Bama number 2. I'm not gonna trust LSU until I see it against Nick Saban and the infrastructure that's at Bama. one of those kind of theories of, prove it to me and then I'll believe it. I got Clemson at number 3 because, again, I think their schedule just allows for them to sneak into the playoffs there as an undefeated 3 seed. And I think the committee would put either one loss or undefeated Bama team over number 4. So I struggle with this. I want to say I envision a scenario where the winner of the Georgia-Florida game could get in if they run the table so let's say that Bama beats LSU, goes to the SEC title game as an undefeated 12-0, plays a one-loss Georgia team and gets beat, right? So now Georgia's got to be in. I would think Alabama would get in over an Oregon or an Oklahoma team, and that you'd have 2 SEC schools in there. So I'm gonna say a tentative Georgia. And I know that my rankings now don't make sense that I'm talking through this, so maybe I should have written it down ahead of time. All right, we're gonna Ohio State number 1, Georgia 2, Clemson 3, Alabama 4.
Wow. I can't believe you're going to put 2 SEC teams in there. And at number 2, the very overrated Georgia Bulldogs. I'm sorry. I mean, you're going to put – granted, they're going to be the SEC champion, but at that point, but you're really going to put them over the one-loss LSU or, maybe even a situation where there's the one-loss Big Ten school.
In my scenario, that only works if Georgia wins the SEC title, which I think is completely possible. It's also not possible. I mean, it's up in the air. I would say at some point, though, the committee's got to recognize that they're either going to get the 4 best teams in to the playoff, like they say, quote unquote, they were supposed to do. Although if you would have played Ohio State and Notre Dame on a neutral field last year, I think Ohio State wins that game. So I still don't think that they necessarily get the quote unquote 4 best teams in. But you can't sit here and tell me after Oregon loses to Auburn that if Georgia finishes the year with 1 loss, or Florida finishes the year with 1 loss, or LSU finishes the year with 1 loss, or Alabama finishes the year with 1 loss, that you can't tell me that you think Oregon's better than any of those 4 SEC schools I just named.
If they have Pac-12 champion in front of them.
But I don't understand the playoff then. If we're just going to give it to conference winners, let's expand it to 6 teams and give it to the 5 conference winners and then whatever the highest ranked non-Power 5 school is. I mean, if it's supposed to be the best 4 teams, I understand that winning your conference is part of the criteria, but if your conference is crappy like the Pac-12 is, Oregon's schedule isn't difficult. I don't understand with them winning the Pac-12 why that has any weight.
Well, I would say the Pac-12 is better than the ACC, and that's just me.
Well, Tony, I
agree with that. I mean, if Clemson loses, they should deserve to be knocked out as well.
Yeah, if this whole thing was based solely on merit, Clemson wouldn't be ranked in the top 10. I think we can all agree with that. I mean, who have they beaten so far this year? North Carolina?
Their best wins are North Carolina and a very overrated Texas A&M team.
I mean, SMU has beaten more ranked teams than Clemson has this year. So if this was based on merit, which it's not. We know it's not based on merit because SEC teams play a AAA directional state team like the 9th week of the season. So it's not based on anything. But it's based on who you play at the end. And for me, it's like, I think either LSU or Alabama are going to get in. And even if Oregon wins out, I think they're left out for a 1-loss SEC team. Ohio State's in the driver's seat, and Clemson, by default of, winning last year, they're going to be in it. So I think Clemson could win every game they play by like 6 points and look awful and still get in the playoff, just based on what they did last year.
Here's Oregon has is 15th in strength of schedule here, and Clemson is 29th.
Yeah, that's not surprising. But the Pac-12 is in a situation the Big Ten has been in the past several years where they get no respect. And deservedly so, because they've put some awful teams out there. So
I'm not going to disagree with that. That's for sure.
And Ohio State only got that And the Big Ten got that back by, winning some bowl games. And the Pac-12 is just going to have to try to get better. In order to get into these big games. Clemson looked really good against Alabama. And they're going to live off that for years to come. I think we're going to be.
So do you guys think there's any path for a one-loss Penn State school, or you think they get pushed? Because the SEC is going to have a school that finishes with. They're going to have a school that wins the title, and they're going to have another school that has one loss. So you think the SEC pushes out a one-loss Penn State school?
Well, Penn State's going to have 2 losses on their schedule. So
who's the second?
Minnesota.
So
Minnesota got a chance, Tony?
Oh yeah, the game's in Minneapolis. If there's going to be an electric atmosphere, I just good.
Are you buying some Minnesota gear for that game?
Might have to. I'm buying huge stock in Minnesota.
Tony's going to make a platter of lutefisk. Watch a couple. Going to watch Fargo, the TV show and the movie. He's all ready for it, I'm sure.
Game day next week should be going to Minneapolis. They don't need to be going to the LSU-Alabama game. They need to be going to Minneapolis. And you're hearing it here first. You heard it last week about the Minnesota bandwagon, and now you're hearing it again. Minnesota, I was looking at the strength of schedule rankings by Sagarian. Minnesota's 75th. Okay, not good. But then I look at Bama at 61, and I see Clemson at 54. And that's up to games to date. Now, granted, Bama's is going to go up because they're playing a couple ranked teams here in the next couple weeks. But Minnesota's schedule is going to get pretty tough. Is it manageable to run the table? If they get by Penn State, anything's possible. But, I think at the time when they play, they're going to have Penn State, Iowa, and Wisconsin, 3 ranked teams on their schedule. And, if you at least make the Big Ten title game undefeated, I think that's a testament to how good you are, because it's hard to win, and it's hard to win 12 games in a row. How many teams have we really seen go undefeated up to the playoff, or even up to
a lot,
conference title week?
A lot.
Not as many as you think.
Now with the playoff of no one wants to schedule anyone out of conference, it's easier. But so what would the line look like on a Big Ten championship game, Ohio State versus Minnesota? What, you think that's like a 15, 18, 23, 24-point spread?
I would say you're looking at probably let's see, Northwestern was at 24 last year. So I would say about 17 and a half.
And that's I think that says everything you need to know about how good Minnesota actually is.
Yeah, if they're a 3-score underdog, then they don't deserve to be at anything.
But I don't think it's a testament to how good Minnesota. I think that's more of a testament to how good Ohio State is.
Let me ask you this question. If Ohio State wins the national title, how much credit are you giving to Urban Meyer?
You got to give him a lot of credit.
He did recruit the guys.
Hey, that's always the argument. They're his players.
They're his players. They haven't committed any crimes yet.
But the steps that Ohio State taken on defense, granted Urban recruited him, but how bad of a defensive coordinator is Greg Schiano, and to a lesser extent Alex Grinch?
Let me talk about Greg Schiano. He may have been one of the worst coaches ever when he was with the Bucs. Well, and whoever thought he would be good when he was at Ohio State, what are we doing with that one? I don't know, but it was really bad.
You mean Rutgers' next head coach, Greg Schiano?
Oh, they're just trying to find anyone they can. They take
what
some
team was
the
he
street.
supposed to go to, and then all that stuff came out about him and whatever it was that he had issues with?
Tennessee.
Jerry Sandusky. Now, wasn't he connected with Jerry Sandusky at one point? And that's where I got.
Even though
So a school that would hire Lane Kiffin wouldn't hire Greg Schiano. I mean, that's pretty bad.
Because some like some 8 degrees of separation between him and Jerry Sandusky.
Yeah. I mean, it was the claims were definitely proven to be false, but
Yeah.
I think that was more of Tennessee fans saying we don't want Greg Schiano. He's horrible.
Yeah.
And I think honestly, granted Tennessee's in some dark times right now, but and is Jeremy Pruitt the answer? That's a question for another day. But I mean, I think they'd be far worse off with Greg Schiano as their coach.
At what point, I question this about Michigan too. Like, at what point do you take some of these schools that literally have not been relevant, like in 20 or 30 years? Like, at what point do we just stop saying, you know, like they're just like a mid-level football school, right? Like, it's always like, oh, Tennessee needs to find the right coach to turn that program around. It's like, well, no, maybe Tennessee is just like not good. Maybe they had their heyday of Peyton Manning, and it's just that school's gonna be in the middle of the SEC for the rest of their,
It's like,
you know,
they got a generational
academic
quarterback.
life.
Like, you just can't expect to pick another one out of the sky. Like, he's just going to show up when Peyton leaves. So
Yeah, it's the same thing with Michigan. Michigan hasn't won a national title since '97. Like, that was literally 22 years ago. Like, at what point is it just like maybe Michigan's just not a powerhouse football school anymore? Sorry,
they've
it's
had
not.
more success with the basketball team.
Yeah,
I-
yeah. I don't get it. I
I
don't get the whole Tennessee Michigan thing. It's just they're cut from the same cloth that they think these schools have more of a pedigree than what they do.
Look, especially now since the NCAA, we can pay players. I mean, the rich are only going to get richer, and Ohio State's got a lot of money to spend. That's for sure.
But all it takes is one season. That's all it takes.
So this has been the Three Guys Analyze podcast. Once again, I'm your host, Matt. We got Tony and we got Rick. Tony, any parting words for our listeners?
You know, have a good week. We'll see you next week. You want a lock of the week this week? I know you want to fade them. However, take Kansas plus 6.5.
Great, excellent. I'm sure they won't cover that. Ricky, any last shots here?
No, I think I'd just get myself and some of our sponsors in trouble if I say anything more. So, you know, that's it. That's all I have.
That's probably for the best. It's rather best not to put your foot directly into your mouth on the way out with these things. No, I've been your host, Matt, and I hope you guys have a joyous rest of the week. Go watch some football, do something having to do with sports, or stay inside and sit on your couch. Both are great decisions, especially with the weather. Right. Hasta luego, por favor.